Welcome to stage 4 of the 5-day pastel challenge. And this is an exciting stage because finally we're going to introduce props. And this is the thing we're going to be using. This is a pastel shaper tool. Well, no, it's not. It's a color shaper tool, but in my studio, it's definitely a pastel shaper tool. It's a size 10 flat chisel, and it's got this flat wedge shape with these flat sides on it, which is really ideal for forming detail. So we're really going to focus in and move on from just using our finger, just using the pastel itself, and move towards using the shaper to really bring up fine edges and go along edges like the dark cloud at the bottom, or work our way up to the wispy cloud in the middle, and so on. So it's not conducting, I feel like I'm conducting here, but it's going to be building detail and how we gradually start to bring things into focus as we work our way towards the final stage. So something different today, and hopefully you'll find it informative, and it'll give you an idea of how I work with this tool to really bring clarity to some areas and not all. Just, you don't want to use it everywhere. It'll make things too busy, but we'll get to that. Enjoy. I'll stop talking again and we will get on. What we're going to be doing here is focusing in and looking at adding some more detail and using something called a shaper tool. In the UK, these are called colour shaper tools, and this one's made by Royal Sovereign, and it's a size 10 flat chisel. I use these a great deal. They're one of my essential tools in the studio for working into details and really controlling, small fiddly corners and edges and straight lines and so on. So I'm just using it here, very flat, to work my way along some of these detailed clouds down here. I'm going to put some light colour behind the cloud. Now, this cloud has already evolved beyond what is in the photograph. So I've let it kind of just develop a bit of its life of its own, really, and I've really had fun with the mark making and the colour. What I'm doing now is going in with a pale colour, so like a very pale lilac, and just building up some detail there. I'm using the tip of the pastel to fill quite a lot of pastel onto the surface, make it dominate, then just using the shaper very flat under my hand, almost parallel to the paper. If you're not sure how to hold it, then I recommend holding it under your finger like that. It's like an extension of your finger. It just gives it a very subtle, delicate touch. And there's some blue cloud behind it, but I'm finding the blue isn't working, so I'm enjoying using all these lilacs and purples and yellows and creams and stuff, and then the blue is kind of throwing it off. So I put a bit of blue in there, but not too much. If you look at the original, you can see there's quite a lot of blue behind it there, but I'm wanting to merge it through here more and make it more part of the whole scene there. Now I have got wispy clouds, so let's put some lines through here and just show a bit of light behind it here. The shaper tool is really good for pulling mark making around as well and sweeping through things. I'm going to push a pale colour up against the edge of this dark cloud and make my cloud out of the negative space behind it. So I'm going to just create a dip and an edge there. I'm pushing pale colour behind it and up into that blue that's underneath it. So there's a bit of blue coming through there, but not a great deal. It's got a nice shape coming through here. It's not necessarily favourable to the photograph. That's not really important. I'm happy with how it looks on here. We're starting to move away from the photograph a little bit, which I think is quite an important thing to do. I've given that a quick knock in, and you can see I've left the edge looking quite sharp. Next, I'm going to use a white, because there's some white edges on these cloud with the light's catching it from behind. I'm going to press really hard, use the tip of the pastel, put some white along this edge, but not consistently. Not every single bit will have a bit of white on it, slightly randomly, and sometimes thicker, sometimes thinner. Let's see a close-up of putting some of that white along this edge here, just to really show you how that pastel's pushing into that surface, and really that erratic movement we were talking about, some thick, some thin. Now we use the shaper tool. As you can see, we've got a strange kind of pointy shaped bit of cloud here, so we can use the shaper tool to push that dark area slightly into that light and just soften that through there. And again, erratic mark making that gives it a bit of variety. We can also use the other side of the shaper. So one side will now have purple on it, won't it? So we can use the other side and just touch some of those marks in and edit them as need be, just gently skimming along that surface there just to get that detail of cloud coming in. That was a firm pressure, wasn't it? Just getting plenty of pastel on the surface. And if you do go to put your white on and it's not showing up, first of all, you need to make sure you're using a Unison white, because you need a very soft white to be able to go on top of these other colours. And if it's still not showing up, if you put a mark down and it's not really appearing on the surface, you don't see the colour coming up very well, then you've probably got too much dust on the surface and you might need to brush a little bit off before you start. If you watch this in action, I'll show you a bit where it happens. So this bit here is not, probably overdone the white through here a little bit, I think. So if I just dust a bit of that way, look how much pastel's coming off with that. Quite a lot coming off the surface, yeah? So I've blown the excess pastel away. If I now go back in with my white, I can see how much brighter it looks than a minute ago where it was looking quite dull. Now it's looking distinctly brighter and it's showing up better because the paper's come back. The paper surface remains tinted, but you get the tooth back up, so I can put some more texture on there and play with the mark making and pulling the shaper through there and creating some interesting dynamic cloud movements behind that area. So it's giving us a nice light edge along here, and then continue that up over the far side. And the minute your shaper tool touches the white and moves it in, it knocks it down a tone or two, or a tint or two, whatever you want to call it. So you can always put a bit more on top again. So if need be, you can go back in and add a bit more. Next, I'm going to take the light on up into the cloud behind with slicing movements. Then add further light where needed. So we continue to add detail, and this time I'm going to use the lemon and just use the tip of the pastel and start filling up some of these areas here with some brighter shades through here. Also that warm bridging colour as well. I quite like that colour with that purple. Don't forget, we talked earlier about not putting this bank of strange blob square cloud in. Don't put that in where the sun is, just go for it being pale through here. Putting some fingers of yellow in there. And then I think I might add some stronger yellow as well. And the shaper can be used to pull the mark making the same direction as already done and repeat the same mark making, or you can go different directions through it and pull and get different cloud effects. So here I'm going to go slightly diagonally across those marks just to soften them in and blur it. It gives you a sense of motion and wind there, which is quite useful. So carry that effect on up into other areas. We've been doing this with light colour, but you can also do it with a darker colour. So I'm going with that mid blue here and just cutting back into that cloud. So it needn't be just with the brightest colours that you do this effect and this sort of detailing. I've decided to go in with the white here, so I really want these paler clouds to be slightly brighter to balance the dark over here rather than muted. So I'm just lifting those up with a bit of colour and a bit of white. I'm just changing some of those blues in this area into more pink shades, just to in with this again, the dark purpley over here. So continue that on up as needed. Bear in mind we haven't got very fine detail yet, but we're really starting to work towards some really nice expressive colours and edges and so on. I'd like to also show you some detailed work through here, just to show you how to create those wispy clouds. We have talked about it before. I want to just zoom in a bit and give you an idea of how that works. So we've got some nice fluffy clouds that turn into these feathery edges. So we're just going to talk about these edges through here and using the shaper tool on top of them. So I'm just using the white and I'm going in using up and down movements along with slicing movements and just putting a few of those more wispy details through into here. So that's on top of that pale blue. As you can see, you get nice crisscrossing going on there. And then we need to work into it with the shaper tool. Now, that different movement I was talking about, let's see that in action here. So rather than following the shape of the mark making previously, that same direction of pastel, it's quite nice to cross the other direction across it, and just because there's actually a movement in the cloud going that way as well, and there's these lines of whisper sort of diffused a bit by the wind direction. So let's use that idea and just get in there with the shaper and just pull a different direction across there. So we've zoomed in a bit more so you can really see that in action. So we've got these lines of pastel through here. I'm going to just go the other way, diagonally across, and just pull gently back and forward. You can see how it just pulls that bit of cloud the other way slightly. It just gives it a really dynamic feel. You get a sense of the weather and the clouds moving across the surface really well here. Just experiment with mark making, experiment with building up those layers, and then experiment with how the shaper tool can interact with that. And you can also go back in again if you want to, and you could revisit that. So there's some areas that are brighter than other bits. So in this bit here, there's a brighter patch of cloud here. So we can then go in and put a bit more brightness on top of that bit and get that little bit there as well, and really pick up certain areas on top of that previous mark making, and then go in with those and just again soften or just leave. If you feel that that will do as it is, you can just build them and leave it, but it's nice to put that movement underneath first before you then go in over the top of it. Have fun with it, build those layers of colour and really enjoy placing the pastel and layering it up and seeing the effect and impact you can get with it. If it gets too muddy, then obviously brush it off and redo, but adapt and evolve the colours as need be to make it work compositionally for you.